What's up, baddies? Welcome to the Chatty Baddies podcast, where no topic's off limits. We're bringing you the tea on relationships, sports, motherhood, mental health, pop culture chaos, and everything in between. Whether you're navigating life after heartbreak, crushing your wellness goals, or just here for the juicy celeb mess, we've got you. So grab your coffee or a harder drink, pop in those headphones, and get ready for some real talk. This is Chatty Baddies. What's up, baddies? Welcome to the Chatty Baddies podcast. I'm Nikki.
I'm Nicole.
And we are the
Chatty Baddies.
And today's guest is someone whose story is proof that rock bottom doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can actually be the beginning. John Mathews went from battling addiction, homelessness, and incarceration in his teens to later serving as assistant mayor during the 2016 Gatlinburg wildfires, where he helped lead thousands through one of Tennessee's most devastating disasters. And he's since then become a proud father, business exec, consultant, and the author of this new book called Wisdom at a Cost. His journey is one of resilience, leadership, and transformation. And Nicole and I are really looking forward to diving into this with him today. John, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're I've been following you for, well, it sounded creepy. I've been following you for a while. No, but I want to get, I've been following your story for a while. And I know you and I have been friends for how long? A few years, right?
Few years now, yeah.
And I appreciate your support with my children's book. And I always tell people, like, John was like one of those people who came to my signings, and he's been so supportive. And that's just a testament to the person you are. And I just, first of all, want to say thank you. And reading your book has been, I don't know, it's kind of eye-opening for me. It's kind of paralleled a lot of the same things in my life as a parent. Like, we'll talk later about breaking the cycle, which I love that you talked about that. But what I want to do is, before we dive into your story, I want to give listeners a snapshot of really what you came out of. And I think one of the things that jumped out to me when I was reading is this right here. God, this gives me cold chills just thinking about it, because I put myself in that position. So I'm going to share this with our listeners. I loaded my 2 duffel bags worth of possessions into the 1978 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme I had bought for $200. I had a pack of cigarettes, a handful of joints, some leftover vodka from the weekend, and that $50 bill from my dad. With nowhere to go and no plan, I started driving. I thought I might pull the car over somewhere and sleep in the back until I figured out what to do next. In the meantime, I turned down the highway, rolled down my window, and smoked a cigarette. Sounds like your pockets were empty, but your soul was even emptier. Talk a little bit about that.
That was one moment that I can probably relive in my mind over and over again. You know, the house that my parents were living in was in a place called Kodak, Tennessee, and they had this front porch. So when I, came home, the part of the story that's not shared is a couple of my friends and I went out of town, and when we got home and they were going to drop me off, because we couldn't drive my 1978 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme because that mug was.
Yeah, I'm reading in the story how it just kind of gave out on you. We'll talk about that. But go ahead.
Yeah. And so that thing was just parked. But when we got there, all my stuff was packed up on the front porch, and the door's locked. Tried to knock on the door, and my dad basically cracked the door open just large enough to hand me this $50 bill, and he said, "Good luck." Literally the only 2 words he said. And I grabbed my shit and put it in the back of that 1978 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme and drove off.
Did she have a name?
Did she have a name? No, sadly. She needed a name. She definitely needed a name.
I love it.
Oh, Betsy, probably.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about that is reading part of your book, it's a very in-depth story. But if you were to capture wisdom at a cost, how would you explain that to someone and say, this is what my book is about? What would you say?
So that, oddly, I get that question a lot. And before I wrote the book, during writing the book, and even immediately after I wrote the book when it first was published, I probably wouldn't be able to answer that question as good as I can now. And the only reason I can answer it a little bit better is just because so many people have been giving me feedback. And the best way to describe it is essentially in this book, we show a version of a person, happens to be me, of what the extreme versions of, rock bottom versus, a very, very great successful story. And in between this battle of, a mental battle between addiction, lying to yourself, this inner voice. It just shows the extreme version of that. However, everybody that has read this book that's not an addict, that has no uh, direct connection to being an addict, has found themselves in these pages because the way it's written, it really resonates with people on either a small scale or a large scale. So to sum it up, from somebody that has had been at rock bottom, my version of rock bottom doesn't mean that it's not going to be familiar or similar to somebody else's rock bottom. Um, and and what I mean by that is, yeah, I was homeless. Yes, I was an IV drug user. Yes, all of that sucked, and yes, that was my rock bottom. But hell, it could have been worse. There's people out there that have a version of their rock bottom that's 10 times worse than mine, and then there's people that have a rock bottom that's nowhere near mine.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing about rock bottom because it's there's no gauge. Right now at 44, my rock bottom is written in these pages, but I've got 40 more years. There could be something that happens to me that puts me lower than that.
But can you imagine that? But for people who've been at rock bottom, you don't want to think about that. You're like, wow, that
I know.
felt.
I got out of that.
Yeah.
I'm on the other side.
Yeah.
And could you imagine going through something even worse?
So when you were at that rock bottom stage, of course, we can have other stages in our life, like you said. What was it that helped you pull out of it? Was it spiritually? Was it a person? Was it a mentor? Was it AA? What was at the lowest of the low help you see there is something that can be different and not
turning
staying there?
Great question. And I need to say, I am a believer in all these things, but at the time, no, it wasn't spiritual. I didn't go to AA. For me, it was essentially knowing that I wanted more out of life than this, and I was tired of where I was at. I had to keep relearning that lesson over and over and over again because I, quite frankly, didn't learn my lesson. And once I finally learned the lesson and I was ready to kind of move past that, then it was a matter of what do I need to do next? And essentially that's where I started. And for somebody that's an addict that, they're just reliving this worst version of themselves over and over and over again, it's hard to believe that you can live and exist in life without feeling like absolute crap. And so what I had to do is I had to look back at early childhood memories, a lot of them with my brother, happy moments that made me realize, hey, I was happy at one point in time without drugs, and I can get back there. So there was one aspect of it, and then the other thing was, uh, learning to forgive myself. Little by little, I lied to myself more. Did I lie to a lot of people? Yes, but the person I lied to the most was myself. And the reason, but I lied to myself so many times is because that inner voice sounded just like me because it was me, and it told me everything I needed to hear at the exact moment to make me do things I should not have been doing. But at the end of the day, all of us, when we make bad decisions, we've got that voice inside our head that tells us exactly what we need to hear, when we need to hear it. It knows our faults, it knows our weaknesses, and it convinces us to do what it wants us to do. And if I was to say out loud to you two, like, hey, I'm going to shoot this needle in my arm and get high, and here's why, to you, you just look at me like, John, that sounds crazy. Like, what the
Right.
hell are you thinking?
There's a couple quick things I wanted to ask you, and I don't know. This is just coming from somebody who's never done a drug. I have to ask, what's like the craziest highest moment you remember? And were you scared? What does it feel like for somebody who's never done that? What does it feel like? Are you out of control? Do you know you're high? What are you feeling in those moments?
Well, it's the drug of choice that I preferred was any type of painkiller, so an opioid based drug, which is going to be your fentanyl, your morphine, your heroin, oxycontin, methadone. These are all the same things. And essentially, the two big chemical releases in our brain that I was craving was dopamine and endorphins. And for the audience and for yourself that's never done drugs, we've in fact all felt the effects of endorphins. And so the word itself literally means endogenous morphine. So endorphins is literally your body creating morphine. I mean, it's literally what it means. And it's binding to these receptors to create this euphoria. Endurance athletes or any kind of runners will experience this when they get done running, and it's this lightheadedness and this feeling of overwhelming joy. Those are endorphins. And if you sit there and you cut yourself and it hurts for a brief period of time and then eventually the pain goes away, that's because endorphins have went there. Endogenous morphine, meaning morphine made internally in your body, binds to those pain receptors. The only thing I was doing was I was introducing that stuff and without any effort, dopamine spikes without effort's a dangerous world, because the second I create that loop in my mind where I grape this pill and I can create this euphoria, and then I start wanting to do that over and over and over again, and then essentially all my decision making is how do I get this drug and how do I do more of it?
Well, and you talk a little bit about your childhood, your brother, and I remember reading in the book about you and your brother kind of getting into some trouble and sneak out the window and the bad grades and the discipline that you had. It sounds like you had discipline in your home, but I want to talk a little bit about your upbringing and then also transition into what how that shaped you as a parent. And you talked about breaking the cycle and generational curses and things like that. And the part that you mentioned, you said, truth be told, I come from a family filled with child molesters, lousy dads, deserters, and abusers. And then fast forwarding, it says, I learned you don't have to be defined by the mistakes of those who came before you. You have the power to choose a different path, break the cycle of negativity, and be a positive influence, especially as a parent. And then you say something that really that hits home for me because of my boys. I think about being a parent, and we have the highest responsibility in the world, I think, is raising a child.
Yes.
And you said, when I became a father, nothing else in the world mattered more than making sure I showed up every day for that little girl. And when you're determined to be a better man or better woman or wife or whatever you are, just having that motivation to say, I'm going to use this bad for good. I'm using this negativity and turning it into something positive. You made that decision. And that's huge. And that's mad respect to you for that, because you could have just kept on with the cycle and the molesters and the abusers and things like that. So I know Nicole asked that question earlier, like what kind of changed, but talk about more so what was going on in your head, those negative voices that before, what changed and really what made you do that?
So I generational trauma is a real thing. And what you described there, being in this lineage of all these bad men has to end somewhere. And for me, I wanted to end with me as I raised my child. I didn't want her to know this. And I say in the book, generational trauma doesn't define who we are; it shapes where we start. And I was born into a family where pain was passed down like an inheritance. Abuse, addiction, and abandonment weren't just isolated incidents, they were patterns and cycles that had existed long before I took my first breath.
Mhm.
And so I wasn't just fighting for my own survival, I was fighting to break a cycle. And I made a choice, and that choice came at a cost, because breaking generational trauma isn't about deciding to do better. It's about years of unlearning what was ingrained for me at birth. And it means dismantling patterns, resisting the pull of the familiar, and often standing alone as I carve a new path.
Are you mad at your parents?
I'm not mad at my parents. uh, I think they did the best they could for what they had. And speaking like breaking them out, father first, he just never he never went to therapy and healed from his own problems. And then it just kind of pushed to us. And for those folks that are listening, myself included, I used to throw out this term called codependency. Like it was a term I knew what the hell I was talking about until I actually learned what codependency was. And besides my dad bringing all this generational trauma that he never healed from, on top of that, he was an alcoholic and he was dependent on alcohol. And then this entire family that lived with him, my brother, my sister, and my mom, we then became codependent to his dependency. And it affected our entire lives. And a great example in my own story is this: my father was married once before and had a child, and he divorced that woman and then married my mother and had us three. So we get to see two different households with the same genes, right? And you look at my older sister, her name is Heather. She still married, 30 plus years, wonderful husband, has two kids, lives a quote unquote normal life. She's a dental hygienist. And then you look at the family that he had control over, he had influence over, and that's me, my brother, and my sister. All three of us were in and out of jail. All three of us were on drugs, and my sister is still on drugs, still has warrants out for her arrest. I mean, if you don't think a chaotic childhood can cause problems, then somebody needs to come study my family.
And that's why I say, are you mad? I mean, how could you not be? I mean, I'm just going to play devil's advocate. How could you not be like, you had this responsibility as a father and the man of the house to take care, at the very least, bare minimum, take care of the kids.
Hmm.
And, again, that's not me talking about, I don't know your father, but how could you not be upset? He could have went to therapy. He could have, I mean, he knew he had probably some issues. And I'm speaking in general tenses of certain people.
But do we not feel like back us we think of the 1900s, my son says, but back then people didn't talk about therapy, right? There was a huge stigma. And I mean,
You still know you have
I think
problems, though.
right, but I think too they didn't think it was a problem,
Or they're
right?
embarrassed to go get
And so I
help.
think thankfully us, this generation, is therapy is not evil and not a problem to go talk and try to figure out what's going on to better your life and better it for your family. I also think, as you were saying, because of course there was issues in his past family prior. I think sometimes it's pushed down and it's never talked about. And then if anybody ever tried to say therapy back then, it was, I mean, nobody ever spoke of that.
It's definitely a more accepted type of environment, or we can talk about it over coffee, over a drink, over Thanksgiving dinner, going to this therapy. And I think that's great. Back then, yes, it was more of a, you just need to pull your bootstraps up and figure it out. Now, my dad technically provided a roof over the house and all these things. It just the way he decided to parent was the problem. And to add to the confusion was when we went out in public, he was loved by everybody, and everybody thought, oh, your dad's so great, he's this, he's that. But behind closed doors, he was not this guy. And I didn't put two and two together until I did have my own family. And I was like, man, this is, no, this is not normal. And when you're living as a child in a household, you think everybody is raised like this. Like you don't know what to compare it to until you get older. And I think I'm going to blow your mind here in a minute, which I don't talk about in the book, and I've never said it before, is the I really think the reason that currently now, and probably for the last 10, 15 years, where I really didn't hold a grudge against them, is because I know what it's like for my mind to control my thoughts. And I had no control over that. So once I came on the other side of controlling the addict brain, as I call it quite often, what I understand now, because I'm more sympathetic or empathetic towards other people that don't have the ability to control their thoughts or minds or emotions, I give it with a sense of grace. So yes, I was mad at my father. Yes, all these things, but because the way I learned in the through my own lens, I was able to show him grace of like, okay, this guy just didn't know what the hell to do, and and that's okay because I didn't know what the hell to do at certain periods of my time. And if I was going to forgive myself for not knowing what the hell to do or how to control my emotions, then I certainly need to be able to forgive others. But here's the wild part. Here's the part I was going to say that's crazy. Nobody else knows is that this same guy, um, I took care of. Like when he got old, he passed away last year. He had dementia, and of course, my older sister, the one that's still has warrants out for arrest, still kind of battling her own demons, obviously is nowhere to be found. And my brother lives in South Florida. My twin brother lives in South Florida. I was the only one here and have been here in Tennessee to be able to take care of him. So for the last 3 years of his life, I put him in a assisted living because he certainly wasn't going to live with me. And that thing was expensive. I don't know if you ever put anybody in assisted
Oh,
living,
Very
but it's
expensive.
upwards of
it's
five
almost.
thousand dollars a
Mm-hmm.
I
month.
mean, I've heard of some of these places. I'm like, I'm gonna check myself in there. They are nice. Some of them,
Oh, yes.
like
They're
pools
expensive.
and.
And once he became difficult for the staff, I mean, he was essentially just being himself that we've had to deal with. And of course, the older they get and the dementia sets in, it's harder to control. I mean, then the real them starts showing. Where he wore out his welcome, and they just raised his rates to almost $10,000 a month. Yeah, I mean, here's the same guy that abused me, kicked me out, and fast forward, I'm his only friend. I am literally the only person in this entire world that would even give him the time of day, and I'm taking care of him. And the crazy part is, right before he went in, when I was in therapy, my therapist said, I think you need to talk to your father and say everything you want to say before he loses his mind because you're going to regret that. I have so many people come into my office and talk about this where they lost their parent, didn't have the ability to have this conversation. So one day after work, I just called him up and I was like, hey, you home? He's like, yeah. And I was like, I'm gonna stop by for a minute. He's like, okay, great. Which his house is on the way home from my house. And this is literally like 4 or 5 years ago. So I pull in, park the truck, walk in, sit down, do our little exchange. Hey, how you doing? Blah blah blah. He pauses his show that he's watching, and I just shoot it. Of course, you've been rehearsing this, what you're going to say, this conversation in your head, and I just blab it all out. And he listened. By the time I finished, this is literally the only thing he said to me. He said, John, I don't remember any of that. And could you hand me that remote right there? Because he just wanted to
Stop.
turn his show back on and continue watching, but he wanted to just ignore
I bet he
everything I
did.
just said to
I
him.
I
bet
bet
he
he
remembered.
remembered
And
some of that.
oh, he 100% remembered. He just didn't want to have the conversation. And so that's exactly, was it closure? Kind of, not really, but it was enough to realize at least I asked, and at least I I saw that he wasn't man enough to have the conversation, and that's all I need to
I
do
know
now.
I know people throw out the term narcissism a lot and gaslighting, but do you think that looking back that he had a touch of that, or I mean, or I mean, I say that to say,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
definitely had a touch of that. 100% had a touch of that.
Well, you definitely deserve more closure than that. But at the end of the day, sometimes people don't get any closure or any resolution, and I think you got your answer when you got his answer there. Well, I'm just going to close on this. The final lesson you put the cost of wisdom, and that's so wild. I mean, you're chasing the next high, but I love that you came out of this. I love your story. I love your resilience. I love the transformation because it's not easy. It's harder going from rock bottom to where you are now. And you're a very successful person. You're a great human. I know, just our conversations, you're always willing to help people. The book is amazing. You say, I stood in the bathroom staring at a man I didn't recognize, a man strung out and broken. While my mind screamed the question, I didn't have an answer for how the did I get here. I felt trapped as if every mistake I'd ever made had brought me to that single moment. Shame, regret, and fear. They were all I knew. That day, I could hardly look at myself in the mirror. But today I stand in front of a mirror and see a man who fought to earn every piece of wisdom he carries. He is not a victim of his past. He is the architect of his future. And if I had to pay the price all over again, I would. Because the cost of wisdom is high, but the price of ignorance is higher. And I'll end by saying this. You say, stay the course. The road is hard. The cost is high. But on the other side of struggle is wisdom, strength, and a life you fought to rebuild. John Mathews, I really appreciate you. Nicole appreciates you.
Yes, thank you so much.
We appreciate your time.
We feel like we could talk to you for hours, though. I was like sitting here. I'm like, we don't want to get off yet.
But our Zoom's cutting us off. So anyway, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
You.
Until then, be chatty.
Stay batty.
See you. Bye.